I want to tell you about my earliest memory. As we get older, memories fade. I even noticed this in my 20s, and really to a certain extent, even in my teens, that things I remembered keenly for a while, I didn't remember as much anymore. And most of us, our earliest memories are later in life than you'd guess, because we spend years being able to talk and communicate, and we don't have really clear memories. We might have some impulses or some images that we remember from times, but clear memories of events is a different story. And mine, I'm not sure how old I was, but I have my own clear memories that have now been expanded by my family's telling of this story. I was somewhere between 3 and 4 years old, I think, and I'm sitting on the edge of a pool. It's at a friend's house in Pennsylvania. Don't even remember the name of the friend of the family. But they had a pool, and we went to this place, and my brothers and sisters that were older than me were all walking back and forth and had been swimming in the pool. But I was too young. I didn't know how to swim. And I'm sitting on the edge of the pool, and something caught me in the water. I leaned over to touch the water, and I just went right in. And as I'm falling into the water, I turn around so that I'm looking up, as you might. And I remember clearly seeing the strong arm of my father reach down into the pool, one arm, grab me and pull me out. And I was rescued. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because I don't know how much of this is true and how much of this is not. But the story in our family goes like this, that when my father reached down to grab me out of the pool, he had a beer in one hand, a cigar in the other, and he managed to get both in one hand without spilling a drop of beer or getting his cigar wet. He pulled me out of the pool successfully. He was that good. It might actually have happened that way. I'll never know for sure, because we just put that as part of our memory. And I love that my first memory is being rescued. Our story today is about a people's memory of being rescued. And I want to give us a little context for where this rescue comes from. And we start with the character of Moses. Moses, again, the Charlton Heston story is a little bit of an expansion. And a lot of that stuff that happens earlier in Moses' life in that famous movie is a little bit overstated, but a lot of the details are actually correct. So Moses is born at a time when Hebrew children are supposed to be killed if they're male at birth. That's by order of the Pharaoh, but it doesn't happen. They just won't do it. But they are hiding their children away, so Moses ends up being, for some reason, they get this clever idea. They put Moses in a basket, they float him out onto the river. Long story short, Moses ends up being raised in the household of Pharaoh. He is a Hebrew, but he is raised as an Egyptian into what appears to be young adulthood. And he ends up running away because he kills somebody. Let's remember that Moses is a murderer. He kills an Egyptian who's beating a Hebrew. He always knew. In the movie, you get the idea that he suddenly realizes he's a Hebrew one day. The Bible doesn't indicate that. It looks like he knew he was a Hebrew the whole time. All right? He knew that. But he's lived a life of privilege, and suddenly he's not content with that anymore. And he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he murders him and hides the body. And then a little while later, he finds out that other people know what he did. He thought he got away with it without anybody seeing, but other people know, and now he's afraid, so he runs away. And a while later, Moses really runs away. Another town, another city, another country, marries, has a kid. One day, God calls him out of the burning bush. We've talked about that before. He calls him out of the burning bush to be the one to set the people free, and that's what he's going to do today. But I want to dispel one little myth about Moses, and maybe you've even heard this preached in a sermon. I have. And that's the idea that Moses is an example of how God calls people who are not qualified and then qualifies people who are called. In other words, the idea is that Moses wasn't qualified to do what he did, so God supernaturally made it happen. That is true to an extent, but in a very real way it is also not. And here's what I mean by that. If you're going to have someone confront Pharaoh on God's behalf to let the people go, it would make sense to pick someone Pharaoh knew, maybe even Pharaoh grew up with, someone who maybe even understood the ways of the court. Moses may not have been a good speaker, and he may have needed help from his brother, but Moses was qualified. He was uniquely qualified and called to actually be the one that sets or works with God to set the people free. He's the perfect choice. So what happens is, at a certain point, God says, that's enough. These people are going to go free now. It's been 430 years of slavery and bondage that the people have been in Egypt. And what happens is every single time that Pharaoh says, no, the people can't go, Moses says, well, I hate to tell you this, but God's going to do something awful to your people. And they have plagues, locusts, flies, boils and sores, darkness. There's 9 of them that happen. And every single time one of these happens, Pharaoh says, yeah, you people can go. And then he hardens his heart, changes his mind, and doesn't let them go. Gets angry at Moses again or something like that. Finally, the 10th plague, which is the plague. And that is the one that is announced beforehand. Every firstborn in Egypt is going to die. That's pretty harsh. And God is going to send the angel of death. And here's something I guess about the angel of death. The angel of death doesn't discriminate. The angel of death is going to find every firstborn and kill them. Just kill. Isn't it funny that our artwork, our classic artwork of angels shows these really gentle, kind of, I don't know, idealized humans, human types that are just standing there like this with their wings, when in reality, every time an angel appears in the Bible, something really awful happens, and the angel literally has to say, hey, whoa, whoa, don't be afraid. Why does the angel say, why don't be afraid? Because angels are terrifying. And this one more than any other. The angel is not going to discriminate, so God makes a way for the angel to tell which homes are the Hebrews and which are not. And he sets up this system where they kill the best lamb they have, and they put the blood on the doorpost and the lintel. They just put the blood there, and then when the angel comes down the road and sees that blood, the angel knows, not this house. Not this house. The angel then passes over that house. Hence the term Passover. Pretty fascinating story, isn't it? And there's a few lessons that I get out of this as I read it again. The Bible always, shows you something maybe you didn't notice the first time, or maybe even something that you forgot. 9 plagues didn't work, and there's Israel at their rock bottom worst. Sometimes rescue only comes when we're at rock bottom. You ask any recovering addict or alcoholic, and they will tell you this. You had to get to rock bottom for anything good to happen, and this sort of happens with Israel. These 9 plagues, and during the 9 plagues, on at least one occasion, Pharaoh got so mad at the situation that he made the Israelites' work of making bricks harder, a lot harder. In other words, instead of providing them the building materials to make the bricks, they had to go out and find it themselves, and there were no hours in the day to do that. They had to go out at night after they were done making bricks and find them. So it's a pretty awful time. And they're mad at Moses. Why are you even doing this? Here you are saying you're going to set us free. You're making our life miserable. You're making it worse every day. Because bad things are going to happen before rescue comes. Otherwise, there's nothing to rescue us from, I guess you could say, right? Another thing that I noticed, and this is really, really important. In fact, I ought to end with this because to me it was the most important lesson I got out of this time. Israel is all in this together. Now, when we say all in this together, we mean that we're talking about sharing. In fact, I want to read you from near the beginning of this reading that precedes the one from today, and this is going to be on screen, I believe, from Exodus 12:4. If any household is too small for a lamb, the man and his next door neighbor are to take a lamb according to the number of people. You will make your own count for the lamb according to how much each one can eat. We can't expect to not be held to the same standard of sharing that God sets up for these people. It's what God asks of us today. It's throughout Scripture how we are to always take care of those who are poorest and most in need among us. This isn't necessarily about poverty, because they're all poor. But this is showing what we're talking about when it comes to sharing. Family of 4 over here. A lamb is way too much. Family of 3 over here. A lamb is way, way too much. Maybe they come together and share one lamb. Because I want you to remember, they were supposed to destroy the meat after. Whatever they didn't eat during this meal, they were supposed to destroy. Hardwired into the life of faith, as the Bible reveals it to us, is this idea that we share with those who don't have as much as we do. It is wired into it. Now, I can list you tons of scriptures on this, but my favorite is a command that they're going to get just a little while later in this same section of Scripture, where God says, look, when you plant a field full of a crop, you know what I want you to do? I want you to leave the edges alone. You leave the edges alone, and then anybody who is in need will come to the edges of your field and just pick from there without paying. Because it's wired into our understanding of how you live a life of following God, is that we share with those who don't have what they need when we have what we need and more. And I love the fact that a little bit of that works its way into even this understanding of how we celebrate the Passover. The next thing I notice here, and this is kind of important to us today. Israel was not to make their own rules with regard to celebrating the Passover. This is a principle that I think I've always understood. It's why I'm always suspicious of new traditions. You know, if we decide that we're going to do something different this year for Christmas, I got to think about it long and hard. You know, in terms of celebrating it in my house. It's like, well, kind of always done it, this way. And that's not a good reason to, it's not a good reason to keep doing something just because you've always done it that way. But you always want to look at something that you're doing new. Churches throughout the centuries very often have done so much trying to find something new that sometimes we throw out something old that was really worthwhile. And we don't want to do that. But God does not say, you are going to celebrate the Passover, you guys figure out what you want to do. He says, you're going to celebrate the Passover, and this is exactly how you're going to do it. And the reason that it's set up this way is that I want to make sure that you create an ongoing remembrance of how you were rescued. Every year, you are going to remember how your people were rescued. They still celebrate it just the same way. Part of the quote-unquote liturgy, someone young is supposed to ask someone older, why is this night different from all other nights? And then the story is told again. One of the things I appreciate about following a more or less liturgical calendar is that when we get to celebrations like Easter, which we kind of missed this year, and Christmas, and even the season of Lent and the season of Advent, we go through and mark these celebrations in a similar way every year to remind ourselves of how God is active in the world, how God acts, how God moves, and how we're supposed to respond. Just like there's a spring, summer, fall, winter, those patterns and those schedules and those seasons are really important for us because we need this. We need to be reminded or else we might forget. I always marvel at friends who, when you ask them, and this is male friends, by the way, never female friends answer this way, but when I ask a male friend, so what's your anniversary or how many years have you been married, they can't answer either question. It's hilarious to me. I've never been that guy. September 6th, and this was 34 years. It's really easy for me to remember because September 6th is also my brother's birthday. So we cheated. But I think I would have remembered it anyway, to be honest with you. It's not a date I forget. And we try to mark that somehow. Maybe we don't take as much extravagance with it as we did when we were younger, but we have marked that date as a date when something significant happened. It's for the same reason that I love that we come together on Ash Wednesday to again mark what that means in our life of faith to start the season of Lent. That we gather on, excuse me, on days like Good Friday and Easter Sunday, and really every Sunday. Every single Sunday is that marker of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we need to be reminded of that. God knows we need to be reminded, so God set it up so we would have these rituals and these cycles and these seasons. And it kind of starts here with the first big religious feast. The next thing I notice is a reminder to us that we need to fully rely on God for what we have, for what we need, even for those basic necessities. We need to remember to rely on God. That's harder to do now than it was for them in a way. I've talked about this a few times recently. Gosh, if the grocery store is shut down for a week, I have enough food at home to get by because I have a refrigerator and I have a freezer. And we stock it up, and we always buy stuff when we buy a bunch of stuff when it's on sale, we freeze it, and then we thaw it as we need it. I mean, we just do that kind of thing. In those days, in your house, you had what you needed for today, pretty much. Because, you could save up grain and things like that, but you didn't have a place to store meat, right? You had to, if you slaughtered an animal that you were going to eat for meat, and they didn't eat as much meat as we do now, you pretty much had to make a plan for how you're going to use that all right now. The best way for us to understand this is with the Sabbath, is with that day that we have off during the week. I guard it with my life. Now, part of the reason I guard it is because I'm old enough that I'm not indestructible anymore. Number one. And number two, I have a sort of a full-time job in addition to preaching to you on Sundays. I have to set up that pattern or else I'm going to burn out. It's just going to happen. I know it. So my day off from my day job is Wednesday. So this week, I had an opportunity to work for a few hours on Wednesday and make a ton of extra money. A little bit tempting. It's like, well, I'm really not doing anything else. It's not like I had anything specific planned. Wednesday was just a day of relaxation, rest. I did whatever I wanted to on Wednesday, other than taking my dog to the vet. So I thought to myself, I didn't think for very long. I only thought for about a millisecond because I guard that day off. I thought to myself, am I going to trust God enough that I don't need the extra money I could earn by working today and instead say, no, I'm staying home. I'm taking my day off. I'm not available. And I chose the latter. And quite frankly, to be honest with you, I'm a lazy enough person that I always will. I have the spiritual gift of knowing when to be lazy. We all should have that. And I took a nap instead. And I read and did things like that. I did something for myself. But for many people in our time and our place, They don't even think about that. The electronic revolution has made it so that we can be reached every second of every day. Oh my goodness, when I get a text, now it's on my wrist. I don't even have to pull the phone out of the pocket. I can allow myself to be interrupted by going like this. No. I do, and you've got to find ways to get away from that, obviously. For me, one of the things I do is we have a program that we use that actually we all communicate with each other during the day through our phones, and I turn that off on my day off. Hey, didn't you see such and such yesterday? No, I didn't, because I turned that off, because I'm not working today, because I'm resting, because I know I don't have to work 7 days a week for God to provide for me and my family. Because God commands me to take a day off, that's for my benefit. So their way of of understanding that for the Passover and sort of memorializing that concept is that they were only going to eat what they could eat today. They were going to destroy the rest, and tomorrow God will take care of the next day. Not me. Rescue is always coming. This is the next thing I noticed. It is always coming. It is always coming from God. The rescue that we receive because of the gospel, because of what Jesus has come, was because of God's action and not ours. But rescue is coming in the world in a way that we get to participate in as well. We have the opportunity to be the rescue for other people, whether that's just sharing our faith in a way that others want to know, how can I follow this Jesus who you serve? Or just in helping those, again, who have less than us. Yes, God is doing the work of redemption in the world, but you and I get to be partners in it. That is the big bonus of being someone who follows Jesus. We get to be part of what God is doing in the world, not just standing by and watching. That's exactly what happens in this Passover story. These people have a very specific role to play. Look, you're going to be rescued. But first of all, if you don't do this Passover stuff and you don't put that blood on your doorpost, you're not going to be rescued. Your firstborn's going to die. So you've got to do something in order to be part of what I'm doing in the world. That's what God is saying. You don't do something to earn your salvation. You're not earning this deliverance. You're not earning this rescue. It's being provided for you by God on high. But you get a chance to be part of what's going on, to participate. They come to the Red Sea. The Egyptians are behind them. There's nowhere to go. God provides the rescue. But would God have split the Red Sea if Moses had not put up his staff? I don't know. We'll never know. Moses holds up that staff and the Red Sea splits. Moses doesn't feel like he's doing anything. And in a grand scheme of things, maybe he's not. God certainly doesn't need Moses to rescue the people. God can just do it directly. But here's the other thing. The Red Sea splits. Rescue is here. Deliverance is here. It doesn't mean anything if you don't start walking through. If you stand there on the shores looking at this dry land that appeared and there's walls of water on each side, which looked kind of scary, so I can understand if people were like, I'm not sure I want to go in there. I can't swim. I can understand people being a little bit, a little trepidation there. But they had to participate in what God was doing. They had to walk through on the dry ground to get to the other side. And that's how redemption happened. And finally, going back where I started, we have to mark this. We have to mark these stories. We have to continue to celebrate the good things that God has done by marking them in our lives. Just like we mark an anniversary or a birthday, we mark the times that God delivers us and the ways that God delivers us. Sometimes we're even marking them before they happen. We're praying for something great, and we're just believing God that God is going to deliver us from this, that, or the other thing, whether that's an illness, hard times, whatever that might be. The best model I could ever think of that is a model of a group of people that felt more like the Israelites than anybody, maybe in any recent history at all. So I want you to cast your mind back somewhere between 200 and 400 years ago, when people of color appeared on our shores from Africa as our slaves. One of the things that was very important was we need to make sure that we don't let them learn to read. Because if they learn to read, they might read the Bible, and heaven forbid they read the story of Moses and the deliverance from slavery of the Israelite people. We don't want them to know that. But you know what? It just didn't work out. They got that message. And they marked their eventual deliverance from slavery and from oppression which is still happening to black people in our country and our world today. But they marked that with songs. They marked that with stories. This hymn that we sang this morning is one of my favorite examples of this. This was an old Afro-American spiritual. I want you to imagine people working in the fields, not allowed to read, but somebody who knew how to read told them the story of Moses. And they marked it by writing out songs and verses that they could sing while they were working so they would remember. While they're enslaved, while they're actually participating in the thing that is oppressing them, they sing these words that they have learned by heart. And the very last verse that we didn't sing it on purpose so that I could use it now. The very last verse of this says, "Oh, let us all from bondage flee, and let us all in Christ be free." Freedom in Christ means something very different to us, who so many of our Christian brothers and sisters spend a lot of time and effort, and I'm sorry if I offend, but a lot of time and effort saying that because of their freedom, they shouldn't be forced to wear a mask or do this, that, or the other thing. That's not what freedom is. That's not what freedom in the Bible is talking about. That's not what they're talking about when Moses talks about freeing the people of Israel, and that is not what Paul is talking about when he talks about the freedom of a Christian. It is freedom from bondage to sin. It is freedom from slavery to ourselves. That is what true freedom is, and that is what the real deliverance is. That is what the real rescue actually is. And that's what those people working in those fields, singing those songs about Moses and the promised land were celebrating. They were celebrating something that hadn't happened yet. That one day they would be made free, and one day they were made free, and one day they will be truly free when we can finally eradicate racism from our society. But for now, we keep singing the songs of Moses, knowing that one day we will be free. The addict keeps singing the songs of Moses, knowing that one day he will be free from whatever that addiction is. Whatever it is that we're struggling with, we sing that song of freedom that one day we will truly be free of it. And we sing that song of freedom as an encouragement to those who believe that are around us that yes, freedom is coming. Freedom is here but not yet. But even more so, we sing that song of freedom so that the people who do not know the love of Jesus but need to hear that and say, there's got to be something to that. I need to know more. We sing that song of freedom in words and in actions, in the way that we would live our lives, in the way that we love our neighbor, and in the way that we reach out to the people who have less than us. Brothers and sisters, let us be Passover people. Let us be the people that observe the ordinances of God, who do the things God asks us to do so that others may know God fully. Let us be those people like Moses, who said, let my people go, knowing how hard it would be, but not stopping until it was done. Amen. Speaking of doing the things that God asks us to do, God asks us to gather together to celebrate who Jesus is and what that means in this thing called communion, which we're going to do today. And this is World Communion Sunday. So even in churches that don't do communion, they're all doing communion today. A lot of them are. So we are celebrating World Communion Sunday, not just as our gathering of believers, but also as believers around the country and around the world gathering together to remember the amazing thing that God has done through Jesus.